How's it going, Pensar basketball community? Today we're going to be talking about the Toronto Raptors, revisionist history with Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam and what that timeline would have looked like. We're going to talk about why the Eastern Conference is a joke, specifically citing the recent trade from the Chicago Bulls and the OKC Thunder. Um, I think a lot of people expected the OKC Thunder to get a little bit more um, than that for Josh Giddey, but it was a straight swap. Josh Giddey, Alex Caruso, a signaling perhaps that at least one of the teams that was in the Raptors' range last year is no longer in the Raptors' range, in my opinion, especially if they go on to tear down and kind of rebuild around Josh Giddey and Kobe White, Patrick Williams, go super young. That's a team that could just bottom out next year. So there's another Charlotte, Washington type of team. John is candor saying Ingram to the Raptors. Yeah, we talk about that later. We're going to talk about the Pascal Siakam extension because we, didn't talk about that. We didn't talk about his 189.5 over 4 years. A lot of fears about, what would it look like 5 years of Pascal Siakam? Well, now we get 4 years of Pascal Siakam, and we'll talk about why I think long term that's an okay deal, but probably one that doesn't necessarily pay dividends in terms of team structure and just how bad I thought Pascal Siakam was at times this year defensively. It's not a contract that's going to have a lot of positive upside down the line. We're definitely going to talk about the hiring of JJ Reddick to the Los Angeles Lakers. I think a lot of people have sold themselves on the fact that JJ is a really smart guy. And how often smart guys make good coaches. And I'll tell you right now that it is not that's not the case. Now, there are plenty of really, really smart people who have not made it as head coaches, and I believe that this will be another one. WYSO, based on your value video from the other week, it seems like a bad deal for the Pacers. Yes, but sometimes you have to pay to play. We can also talk a little bit about Bronny James. I think a lot of people are expecting him to go to the Lakers at 55. We'll talk about that as well. So, okay, let's start with this Bulls Thunder trade, right? Now, obviously, allegations around Josh Giddey, ironically, just did a live about Drake, and I'll get into that at the very end as well because I got a lot of interesting DMs and a lot of feedback on that, and I think I needed to clarify some of my points, some of the stuff that I think, but I'll clarify that towards the end because I realize that a lot of people are not tuning into this for my thoughts on hip hop and culture and stuff. So we'll save that to the very end. Late night entertainment. Thank you, Rob. You're welcome. All right. So first of all, we're here right now, 3 minutes into this live. You do me a favor, hit that like button in case there are any other insomniacs around the city who might want to come in and just have a nice little chat with us. I will also say this is a call-in show, so if you got something to say about what I said earlier in the live, or if you got something to say about the draft or JJ Reddick, and you want to have your take heard by the 1,000 plus, 2,000 plus people that are going to watch this video, by all means, let's call in and have a conversation. It's always a lot more fun to have two people than one. All right. So specifically, this Josh Giddey and this Josh Giddey to the Bulls thing. Clearly, the lack of shooting progression year over year has made Josh Giddey less of a bullish prospect than he was after his rookie season. I think after his rookie season, there were enough people who felt comfortable saying, yeah, we're happy we took Scotty Barnes, but this Josh Giddey guy could be better. I think after year two, there were some people, especially when Scotty struggled early, that were saying, see, the Raptors should have picked Josh Giddey. Josh Giddey's going to be better. To give you context, the Bulls just traded a near 30-year-old straight up for a 21, 22-year-old Josh Giddey. That's almost never done. I think the first thing that I thought when I saw this deal was how many picks? Like what was given up here? Now, my thought process was not, oh, wow, like the Bulls probably gave up multiple first round picks. I realized that they have a new, staff in there that hasn't necessarily handled things super well. But this is the same team that didn't trade Alex Caruso for allegedly multiple firsts, right? So I was expecting a little bit more, and the fact that they got Josh Giddey for that and I just said Josh Giddey, my bad. Josh Giddey for that is kind of strange to me, given that he was a member of the 2021 draft. But it also makes a lot of sense too, right? He's a restricted free agent, but if it works out for you, you're gonna get him on a pretty good deal, right? If he works out for you, he's got very bearish stock right now. I cannot see a team sitting there and saying, "Yeah, we're gonna put this guy at 22 million, 23 million." His talent is certainly 25 million plus. There are a lot of young players that have been paid more and are less talented than Josh Giddey. The question mark right now with Josh is really how much better has he gotten since he was a rookie? How does he fit into an NBA scheme? Can we hide him defensively? And is he worth whatever he's going to give up defensively on offense when he can't really shoot? With the ball in his hands outside of the system of OKC, where they have better ball handlers, yeah, I think he could be in for a very big year next year, and he'd be smart to bet on himself. At the end, though, it's not going to result in a hell of a lot of winning, in my opinion. And so I think Alex Caruso was a much better player, but obviously the Bulls are not in any position to be competing. And so they trade him. And for the OKC Thunder, they get a vastly better player. Alex Caruso is a much better player than Josh Giddey. He's going to fit in better with that team. They have Kason Wallace, Alex Caruso, and Lou Dort on the same team. What this team is capable of doing defensively is honestly mind-boggling. Now, add into this that because Alex Caruso was so underpaid and because Josh Giddey was a top 6 pick, their salaries are almost a wash. It's very close, right? Josh makes a little bit less, but they still retain a massive amount of cap space. Now, I'm not sure they're going to use that cap space. Don't get me wrong. There's a chance they're not going to use that cap space because they understand the implications long term. Alex Caruso can be re-signed up to 120% of his current contract almost immediately. And then after 6 months, I think they can get him up to about 80 million across 4 years, if I'm not mistaken. That all being said, they're going to wait because his current contract is dirt cheap and there are a multitude of teams. I also believe because he's an unrestricted free agent, you are taking a risk that maybe he doesn't want to be in OKC. Maybe he wants to go somewhere else. And if you're going to pay, you're going to pay through the nose to keep him. But I think he fits very well, right? We have to talk also about Malik Monk as well. A very surprising, report that just broke that Malik Monk, my boy Leo, I saw that post right before I went live that Malik Monk is going back to Sacramento, which takes one of the creme de la creme top free agents off the market. So if you're keeping track right now, this was a free agency draft, free agency class that featured some notable names. Pascal Siakam, he's going back to Indiana. We're going to talk about it. Malik Monk going back to Sacramento. We can talk about it a little bit. Okay, Paul George, don't know what he's going to do. OG Anunoby, don't know what he's going to do. It's a really strange situation because there's like 6 teams. And now you wonder, the OKC Thunder had some cap space. They have made this trade right now. Is this their we felt around to see if Paul George and OG Anunoby would be options on a short-term deal? Since they're not, we're just going to go and get our wing to complement our starting lineup. Because I'm pretty sure if you could have kept Giddy or traded Giddy for just picks, which is certainly possible, you don't have to go for an Alex Caruso. You could just use the cap space and go get OG Anunoby if he was willing to come. You could have gotten a DeAnthony Melton. I realize Alex Caruso is a better player than DeAnthony Melton defensively and probably fits in a lot better, but Melton is younger. I don't know. So maybe they felt around the room and said, hey, it's actually advantageous to us to get one more year on the discount on Alex Caruso, worry about re-signing him later. But this is still a small market team. I do want to say also, the deals that you sign now will look better 2 years from now, 3 years from now as the cap goes up. It will hurt for a little bit, especially if you're already an apron team and you're going into the second apron. There will be implications of that, draft picks, flexibility, etc. But I do think that it's important to realize that the cap is definitely going up, that the next TV deal is going to flood a lot of money back into the league. It's going to be slowly bled out, 10%, 10%. And the expectation there is, yeah, maybe you feel like OG Anunoby for 35 million right now is a really bad deal, but in 4 years, you're gonna be signing a starting small forward to 32 million. So why not get a really good one? And because the deal is accelerating up, you're gonna have him locked in through his prime at a pretty fair value. I hope that most agents really do understand that. That being said, with all that money flooding into the NBA, this could be an offseason where teams are conservative so that they can try to park their dollars up for next offseason. Or this might be an offseason where teams do offer some bigger contracts. That's why I was a little bit surprised that Malik Monk, who is a very good player, who had, that injury and unfortunately lost out on Sixth Man of the Year, but I think he was a shoo-in to win it. I'm surprised that he's going back to Sacramento for less than 80 million. And I do believe that this opens up some interesting doorways to other things down the line, right? Obviously, Malik is going back to Sacramento. He is obviously above in the rotation of guys, and especially in the pecking order over guys like Harrison Barnes, Kevin Herter. Does that open up those guys going somewhere? Do they now need to clear their books a little bit? Can somebody help facilitate that, right? Kevin Herter, 2 years, right? Chris Boucher, 1 year. Bruce Brown, 1 year. Is this now a trade partner for you? It's worth thinking about, right? None of these deals can be made official until July 6th. So I think that it's also worth addressing that, there is a little bit of room to go back on this at some point. Naturally, we're not expecting a DeAndre Jordan Maverick situation here, but it could happen. Overall, I really, really like this deal for OKC. Alex Caruso is one of my absolute favorite, players. I think he's so low maintenance. I think he's super smart guy. He fits in beautifully with what they want to do. And I think with this deal, with the ascent that I expect from Chet Holmgren, he was incredible this year. With Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being the meticulous craftsman and perfectionist that he is, he's an incredible player, right? I could expect the Thunder to run roughshod over the entire league next year. I could expect that team to win 60 plus games very easily and be a monster in the playoffs. You're adding Alex Caruso to a team that already had Lou Dort, and with Kason Wallace on the upswing, Isaiah Joe on the upswing. I mean, the OKC Thunder are an embarrassment of riches. They are so far ahead of everyone in the league in terms of overall asset based value, which is to say, if I were to price out everything on their roster and everything on their books right now and just mark it out as almost like an auction, right? If I could auction off every single draft pick for the next, 7 years for the Raptors and all their players, and I could do the same thing with every team, which team has the greatest auction value? I think it's the OKC Thunder. I really do. I think Chet is right now, if Chet Holmgren was waived, Chet Holmgren would get a max. If Jalen Williams was waived right now, J Dub would get a max. If Shea was waived, he would get a super max from any team. That's 3 max players. Kason Wallace, Alex Caruso, these are solid like $20 to $25 million type of players very soon. Okay. Lou Dort is a $20 million type of player. You just have such an embarrassment of riches. It is ridiculous, right? Kirk Royce saying the Bulls got younger. Cool. You could have traded for a draft pick and gotten even younger than this. I don't necessarily understand, but I do understand that they are taking a bet on upside, and maybe they will offer Josh Giddey a contract extension right now, right into this offseason, now that his stock is very low and maybe he's a little bit worried. Maybe his agency is going to screw this up. Maybe there's just a lack of market for him, given the allegations last year and the bit of a PR hit that he took. And I think that's putting it very kindly. Maybe there's a world in which Josh Giddey signs for Lonzo Ball money, which would be considered a very big steal given his age and considerable upside. And also given the fact that maybe 2 years ago, when we were thinking about Josh Giddey, we were talking about a guy who was probably going to get a max contract after his rookie season. Now, he hasn't gotten better, but that's not to say that he can't have an explosive year with the Bulls. What I am going to say with some degree of certainty is, given his shooting and defensive woes, I find it very hard to believe that he is going to impact winning more for the Bulls than Alex Caruso would have. So, and I also don't know how he fits in with Kobe White. I assume Kobe White moves into off-ball role next to Josh Giddey. So maybe that means, we see a triple double type of year for Josh Giddey. Maybe we see an all-star season for Josh Giddey. He's finally unleashed, but I don't see it. So interesting move, but I think it adds one more bad team to the Eastern Conference. Let's talk about the Pascal Siakam extension, and we'll tie it into this revisionist thing that people are talking about on Twitter right now, where they say, shouldn't the Raptors have just given him the 4-year deal? The whole concern was 5 years. You didn't want to give him 5 years. Personally, I didn't want to give him 4 years. So the 5 years was a non-starter. I didn't care about I didn't care about the 5th year. I cared about the 4th year and the 5th year. So to me, this is a compromise. It falls somewhere in the middle. Allegedly, the Raptors had offered him a 3-year deal. He didn't like it. Makes sense, because at 3-year deal, he would be an expiring contract and he would be heading into free agency as a 33-year-old, probably almost definitely unlikely to earn anywhere close to his 4th and 5th year value. He left 50 million plus on the table by declining that 5th year, or not declining that 5th year, but really just not being able to get that 5th year. And I'm a little bit surprised. I'll be honest. I'm a little bit surprised that he settled for the 4-year mark. I mean, he had the Pacers by the balls. It's not like they have some considerable cap space to go and chase somebody else. That being said, maybe they privately communicated to him that we're not going to give you the 5th year, and suck it. Like, we're not, you don't have necessarily another team out there that's just dying to give you this type of money. And maybe that's true, or maybe the reporting around him wanting to go to Indiana, play with Tyrese Halliburton is just that he feels comfortable there, and that they said, hey, like, we would prefer to give you 3, you want 5, let's settle for 4. I don't think there's a chance in hell that he makes the value of that contract over the 4 years. But for next year, it's going to be fine. The year after, it's probably going to be okay. I think in year 3 and 4 is when you start getting into scary territory, when his quick twitch stuff goes away. But he's a remarkable professional. He's obviously someone who has taken a lot of professional pride in keeping himself in shape. And so I don't think that it's just going to be a situation where he falls off a cliff like Gilbert Arenas, or, one of those contracts where you sign a guy and he's just done with basketball. I don't think it's ever going to be that way with Pascal. And I didn't think it was ever going to be that way with Fred. These guys obviously have a great deal of pride and work ethic. With that being said, he's not worth, in my opinion, that kind of money. But if he maintains where he's at right now for those 4 years, he will be worth that money. Which begs the question, why didn't the Raptors bring him back, right? You had already traded OG. You had gotten rid of Fred, right? The whole deal last year was the Toronto Raptors were a 41-win team that had 3 guys who wanted to get massive money. And it was really 4 guys who wanted to get massive money, right? In order to, sign that core back together, you would be the ultimate treadmill team, because you hadn't seen enough evidence to suggest that that was a winning team or a championship team. Scottie wasn't getting much better. There were roster overlap issues, timeline issues. And if you couldn't even sell the concept of winning and playoff experiences, then what were you really doing? Other than hampering your ability to build around Scottie later down the line, hampering your ability to get draft picks by being worse. So they made a decision to move away from Fred VanVleet because they suspected that signing him to 35 million would be kryptonite. And I get that. I think Fred VanVleet would have come back for 35 million, maybe 36 million. But I also sensed from talking to people around him throughout the year that they wanted him to leave. I don't know. That doesn't speak for Fred. I never talked to Fred, but I got the feeling from people around him the entire year that they were just ready for this chapter to be over, that he had gotten so much negative PR. You're welcome. And a lot of, scrutiny. You're welcome. And, the media narrative and the public sentiment had shifted around him a little bit. You're welcome. And, people were dissecting his clips and doing low light videos. You're welcome. So, maybe it was time to just sort of turn a leaf, right? With him, right? It was time to just move on. He felt he was wanted there. He felt a purpose. He felt a calling, and boom, We got it. And luckily for everyone in Rockford, they no longer have to, you know, renew their passports to visit Freddie. That's great. Everyone wins. But once that guy was off the books, didn't it make sense that you could now afford Pascal and OG? What gives, right? I think what gives is that the timing of this free agency is so awkward, right? Like it is so awkward. You have Philadelphia and they have a ton of money and they need exactly the players that you have to re-sign. And so if even if you had managed to re-sign one, there was always a chance they were going to go get the other, right? Like, and it holds you a little bit hostage because you kind of have to get them both, or you could lose one. You would almost be pitting them against each other. OG and Pascal would have entered. Let's just say, build another timeline. The Raptors don't make any trades last year. They entered this season with OG and Pascal hitting free agency, right? They're probably like a 38 to 39 win team. They probably ended up, in the play-in or just outside the play-in. So many things would have happened in that situation. Number one, maybe some of those younger guys wouldn't have gotten as many reps, right? Number two, you would still have a massive hole at the point guard spot, unless of course Scotty was filling that point guard role, right? Long term, right? You would still have like a little bit more roster confusion. You would be older, right? You wouldn't be nearly as young with RJ and Emmanuel Quigley and draft picks. You would be a lot less stocked with the draft picks. And we'll talk about draft picks at some point and how valuable I think that 31st overall pick can be, right? That they got back in that OG trade. I'm almost at a point where I think that 31st pick might be more valuable than the 19th pick. You know what I mean? It's a really interesting pick for a lot of reasons. So let's just say you enter free agency and you have it in your mind that OG is about worth 35, and you have it in your mind that you want to get 4 years or like 4 years out of Pascal, right? But he's holding your ass to 5 because he's leveraging 4 from somebody else, and that somebody else is probably Indiana. And if it's not Indiana, maybe, just maybe, it's Philadelphia. And those two teams need exactly this type of player. So let's just say you do manage to convince Pascal to come back. Now they're offering OG a max. Now you got to offer 2 maxes to 2 guys that you don't even think are worth max. So why have I now been suggesting, and in short, that's why they needed to trade them, because they were heading into a disastrous situation where some team could just poach them away. And because you wouldn't have the negotiation power, you would have to overpay them to keep them. Effectively, they would be able to leverage multiple offers against you. Granted, nobody is very scared about OG Anunoby or Pascal Siakam saying, we're going to go to Detroit. Okay, nobody's going to Detroit in free agency of any note. I get that. But Utah, San Antonio, um, Indiana, and Philly, that's 4 teams, all of which need exactly this type of player. And right now, you the Toronto Raptors, you've played it safe. Emmanuel Quickly, restricted free agent. So you get to keep him no matter what. You'll have to overpay him for sure, but there's no chance of losing him, right? And RJ Barrett is under contract, so you don't have to lose him. And Bruce Brown, better or worse, he's under contract and has a team option. So there's no chance of losing him either. What you did was you took 2 assets that are the best assets in this entire heap. And what you did is you converted them into 7 assets that you have more control over. Another thing worth noting, Precious Achiuwa. I don't know how they felt about Precious Achiuwa, but I'll tell you what, if you really like him, I'm pretty sure you can get him back. I'm never going to say bring him back because I'm not really a fan of Precious Achiuwa right now. But I'm just saying, if you end up like striking out on OG Anunoby and you decide maybe Precious Achiuwa is worth a second go around, I'm pretty sure if you sign into an offer sheet of 10 million or 11 million, the Knicks would not match that offer. So there's no loss there either. But imagine you're the Toronto Raptors and you got Precious, OG, and you got Pascal. Well, guess what? If you sign OG and Pascal, you don't have the room to sign Precious, especially if you'd kept Dennis. So now you're capped out, and Precious Achiuwa is going to whoever can afford him at 9 million. And I'm sure at the time the Raptors would have at least valued Precious as much as a mid-level exception, given the fact that they've given 6 million to Khem Birch, who is worse, and they've given 11, 12 million to Boucher when he was older and had a lot less potential. So I do think that maybe they just decided to consolidate some of their holes into stability. Okay. Penny Hardaway saying Precious stinks. Neither here nor there. He fills a valuable player archetype. I do think that there is probably some team in the league that can sell themselves on giving him at least something close to the mid level exception. And then, of course, there's the Gary Trent equation. You have to lose Gary Trent. If you sign these guys, you losing Gary Trent no matter what, because now you're super capped out, right? So I think that that is why the Raptors didn't do it. For anyone asking, right? If you traded one, why not the other? Well, the other would have the same negotiation tactics the other one did. And therefore, with Pascal, you're probably sitting there with him leveraging multiple 4-year offers against your 5-year. And you would be like, okay, we have to sign him for 5 years. We're going to lose him for nothing. He's going to play hardball. He's going to say, I'm loyal. I want a championship here. You got to realize that when these guys left Toronto, they lost a lot of their negotiating power too. You don't get to tout your championship nostalgia when you're in Indiana because you didn't win one for them. They don't care. It's on your resume, but you didn't win one here. You don't have them by the balls. Do you realize how bad it would be in terms of a PR nightmare for the Toronto Raptors if word got out that the Raptors cheaped out on the 5th year and Pascal Siakam decided to go to Philly or Indiana in your conference? I think that would be very, very disastrous from a PR perspective, especially since you spent 4 years trying to hype this guy up as a future MVP. So I think that the Toronto Raptors read the tea leaves, decided to make the very uncomfortable decision. Now, that being said, do I think that what Pascal Siakam signed for is fair? I think it's a TBD. I wouldn't have done it, but I realize why the Indiana Pacers did it. They pretty much agreed to do this when they traded for him. Let's move on to JJ Reddick and why I don't think he's going to be successful in LA. Um, Look, I like JJ Reddick a lot. Um, I've listened to his podcast. I listened to a little bit of his podcast with LeBron James. And it's ironic that a lot of people, the minute he started doing a pod with LeBron, they were like, this is a cue for him to become the head coach of the Lakers. They're going to do this, especially because they're breaking this stuff down. Now, as somebody who understands 97 to 99% of every word that comes out of his mouth, maybe there's one time where he'll call out a play where I'm like, what's that? And I have to Google it. But I understand what he's saying. I don't think he's that smart. I really don't. I'm not trying to be controversial here. I'm really not. He is extremely well spoken. And the fact that people think he's really smart has there's a multitude of things that are happening to your brain all at once. Number one, he's incredibly articulate. He's very well spoken. He has a lot of confidence and flair and charisma, right? He is a bit of a douche and a little bit of a sarcastic know-it-all and thinks he's better than everybody. And so when you have that air of confidence and somewhat cockiness, I think a lot of people would assume that you really, really know your shit. And then on top of that, he's an NBA player who clearly was a bit of a role player. So he is clearly well versed. But honestly, like he's just able to articulate it in a way that most people aren't. And it can intimidate some people. But if you ever saw an NBA player like a Jason Kidd, right? If Jason Kidd or Magic Johnson or Phil Jackson, an ex player, right? Kurt Rambis, shit. Like I'd go down the list. Isaiah, like really, who else? Who else would be a good example of this? Jose Calderon, right? If any of these people started talking to you about basketball, I think that you would realize that they have a tremendous amount of knowledge that an average person simply doesn't have. And if they had learned to frame their vernacular and the things that they were saying in a certain way, they might be able to create the illusion that they are extremely smart. I want to say something else, which is just it's no Diddy when I say this, but he is a very good looking guy, right? That is weirdly subconsciously something that people hone in on. And I noticed this when my girlfriend started to like tell me how he was so great at commenting on basketball. And I was like, you don't even know half the shit he's saying. Why are you saying that? Right. So I think that there is that air of things. Being a head coach in the NBA is not about being the smartest guy in the room. I promise you it's not. It's just not. Like I mean, I've never been there. Frankly, what am I saying? I promise you, like it's not like oh yeah, when I was a head coach, I don't know shit about being a head coach in the NBA. But I do know that I've read books from head coaches. I've listened to hours and hours and hours of interviews from people who have explained the process. I have talked to people who are in that circle who can explain to me, what people are looking for and why certain guys failed. Being a head coach is almost 100% in the NBA about relationships. It's about managing relationships, being good at relationships, and it's about being the type of person that people trust. Okay. Say what you will about about JJ Reddick. I wouldn't trust him. Now, the context of this is not that, oh, JJ Reddick will never be a good coach. I'm sure there's a world in which he can be a fantastic coach. But the coaching is not what is on the line here. It's not how good a job he's going to do scouting scouting other people or drawing up a game plan. That's not really the job of a head coach. It's how well he's going to manage his staff, how well he's going to manage his young players, how well he's going to manage egos and emotions and expectations and lineups and rotations without the experience. How well you do all of this ultimately as a, let's be honest, a white guy, right? A young white man who has not by any means, and I hope he would agree with this, paid his dues. When you got guys like Sam Cassell, who probably definitely deserve a job and an opportunity, you got Monty Williams getting fired, who has considerably more experience. And trust me, I'm not the first person. I'm never going to say, oh, this guy had more tenure, more experience, so he needs to be hired. I'm just saying when you jump the line, you better be generational. And I don't think he is. I don't think he is. So it's just there's so much pressure that goes in LA. It might be the hardest coaching job in the NBA, right? I mean, there's some semblance of title expectations anytime you have a LeBron James and an Anthony Davis. And when things go bad for that roster, and I'm sure that they will, with Rob Pelinka running the show, Jeannie Buss, right? That entire shit show of a soap opera that is the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm sure at some point it's going to come down to managing your own emotions when you're JJ Reddick. That's going to be tough. He didn't have much of a poker face. I think he needed to get a little bit older before he did this. I hate to say that because I'm someone who's often been told you need to be older before you do this, and I've always resented it. But I do think that managing a group of young men for 82 games like this, he might have just sold himself on his own shit. Like there's that, I don't know, this is a statement which may be a little bit crass, but he convinced himself that his shit don't stink. Like it might just be one of those things where he got high on his own supply. You know what I mean? Like he might have just thought to himself, like, hey, like I run this really successful podcast. I'm super great on the mic. How is this any different than coaching, right? And I realized, that he's had good coaches. He's had Brett Brown as a coach. He's had Doc Rivers. Okay, so maybe he hasn't had the greatest coaches, but he's talked about these experiences. But I just feel like there's an illusion going on with him where he is just not as good as he sounds. And the LeBron connection, if things start going south with him, if there's something going on in that locker room, I tell you, everyone's got a trainer, everyone's got an agent. People are going to start looking real sideways real fast. And if that team comes out 2-10, it's going to be really tough. It does not help that, in my opinion, they're not a playoff team right now. As the roster is currently constructed, you can say what you want about LeBron James. He is heading into probably his last year in the NBA. And add to that, you have the potential of bringing in Bronny James as well. So, like, this is not a basketball team. This is a circus right now. All right, let's talk about Monty Williams. Monty Williams became the highest paid coach in the NBA last year. It was an honor that was very short lived, and the coaches union salutes him for it because ultimately his contract with the Pistons was so high for a multitude of reasons. Number one was the fact that he wanted to basically quit basketball for a bit and focus on family. So I think that was one of the things where the Pistons came to him and offered him some money, and he said no. And then they just upped the offer. So maybe this is a lesson for Tom Gores in the future. Not that it matters now because they'll, well, maybe it does matter now. Maybe you're chasing a new coach. So maybe a lesson for the future that when someone says no, believe them, right? Now, the reason the offer had to be so high is for the same reason that his next offer is going to have to be super high, which is that, and this is something that I'm 99.8% sure about, but there is a 2.2% chance that I'm wrong. As I understand it, if you are a head coach and you are terminated or fired prior to the end of your contract, then you are owed the full amount of that contract unless another team employs you At which point, that team will cover their salary amount, and your ex team, under which you were under contract, they terminated it, will cover the differential between your new salary and your old salary. Which means that if Monty Williams is getting paid $5 million, right? And the Detroit Pistons have paid him $5 million, he doesn't actually make any more money, and it would be much better for him to just sit at home. So if you pay him $12 million, at the very least, he's getting $7 million more than the $5 million he was collecting to sit at home. That's the tough thing about sometimes when a coach gets fired. Now he is getting fired. He has gotten fired with $65 million left on his deal. I didn't think he was that great a coach. I think he's an okay coach. I think he's a top 15 coach in the NBA. But I do think he was put into a situation which was absolutely horrible. And I'm not accusing anybody of anything, and I have no insight into this at all. But I wonder if a part of him was just mentally checked out with the shit show that is the Detroit Pistons. And I'm sorry to say that a lot of young players probably suffered for it, right? Jaden Ivey has had his development curve almost stomped. I believe in Asar Thompson as a prospect. It seemed like his season was also somewhat weird. And I also believe, of course, I believe in Jalen Duren. And I don't think that he had a really good year last year. And I don't think that that progression is really coming as fast as they would have liked with him. Osmosis Jones, at least Redick was a stud in college. How nice. They said go home and be a family man with a Stan Van circa 2005. Now he can spend time with his family and get paid. Sure. Yeah. And I mean, he was already going to have time to spend with his family. So why drag him away from that and take 5 years off his life, making him coach that team? I think the problem with the Pistons is probably ownership. It's probably that, right? You've changed everything at this point, right? But you haven't changed one thing. Ultimately, whoever comes in is still going to be coaching a team that is built around Cade Cunningham. And if I had to rank the 30 players in the NBA that are being built around currently, Cade is 29th of those 30 players. And the only player worse than that is probably whoever the hell the Washington Wizards are building around. Because I can't think of a worse franchise player than Cade Cunningham right now. I really can't, and I dare you to try. So at the end of the day, if you're going to run 28% usage, 20 to 32% usage on, probably a guy who's not even a top 80 player in the NBA, I realize he flashed some good stuff towards the end of the year, but he's turned into a bit of a non-defender. He's not the most efficient, and he's not a great shooter. So again, it's a little bit Josh Giddey-esque in a sense, except Josh is the way better passer and Cade is like the way better scorer. But like Johnny saying, "Hey Rob, Sam Cassell is a coach where? Shit, anywhere." Why so saying Scoot Henderson? Well, honestly, that's a fair point. I'm not really sure Scoot is the franchise, but you're right. If Scoot's not the franchise, who is? But he wasn't even coming. He was coming off the bench at times last year, right? I still think Anthony Simons, Shaden Sharp. There's got to be someone on that Portland team you would take over, right? I cannot say the Nets are worse. Mikal Bridges is a much, 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 much better player than Cade Cunningham. Come on now. Come on now. So, point is, he's still going to come in, but hopefully, breath of fresh air. Hopefully, the Pistons are not nearly as bad as they were last year. It was depressing as shit to watch a team lose as many games as that team lost and to see the people losing their minds. It's very depressing when your city is home to that type of losing streak and you get all this attention and all these people flooding your DMs, flooding your comments, flooding your videos. I can't even imagine if that happened to the Raptors and I had like Lakers fans and Clippers fans coming into this as we lost our 24th or 25th straight saying like, oh, y'all are shit. Like it's I don't want to say it's that even that serious, but it is demoralizing. So I hope that doesn't happen and good luck to whoever coaches them. But there's a value of like attracts like, and sometimes you do have to ask yourself, and this is a question that I was asking our condo board here, which is what type of buyer do you want to attract? Because in 25 years, you're going to see the result of all these renovations that you're doing, the design choices you're making. the policies that you're adopting, how high your maintenance fees are, you're going to see that represented in the type of people who ended up coming into this building and buying units versus the people who ended up walking out saying not for me. And there's a tendency to overlook the importance of culture, the importance of stability. But I'll tell you, once an organization gets this reputation as don't go there, bad things will happen, management's not honest, you get shafted, they're controlling, whatever. When you create an environment where people don't like to go to work, I promise you at some point, it's going to shift the people who want to come into work. And eventually, it's going to shift the people that you can actually get to come to work for you in the first place. Once companies on, what is it, like rotating door, red door, clear door? There's like a website. I apologize. I haven't had like an actual job in like 10 plus years, 13, 15 years. Revolving door, it's like a website. And you get all the ratings of like what it's like to work at that company. Well, I think, around the NBA, it's a very close-knit group. It's like really, it's like I want to say the NBA is like 1,500 to 2,000 people really that know anything about the NBA. Glassdoor. There we go. Thank you very much. John Lem with the super chat. I do appreciate it. I think Jalen Green is worse. Jalen Green is definitely 1,000% not the franchise player in Houston. I promise you that, especially with Ime Udoka running shit. Right now, that tag belongs firmly to Alperen Şengün. If it does not belong to Alperen Şengün, it is a temporary holder to Fred VanVleet. If it's not Fred VanVleet, it is Amen Thompson. If it's not Amen Thompson, it's Jabari Smith. I think Jalen Green is far down the pecking order in terms of whose team that is. This is not 2 years ago. But I appreciate that. I appreciate the super chat, man. I appreciate that a lot. In fact, if y'all see these video games back here, I was able to pretty much buy back my childhood, a lot of it. And at some point, I will definitely share some of this shit with you. But like, I got to buy back these things, and retro gaming is pretty expensive, and it was largely due to this community being so freaking generous. It was like 4 or 5 months ago, if y'all recall, there was like a month where we did really well, and that month was so well that I was able to finally get something for myself. I'm notoriously bad at this stuff. I don't spend on myself at all. My girlfriend would tell you, and she would attest that maybe like I go an entire year and I buy like 4 things for myself. So to have gotten this outpouring of generosity via super chats and all that stuff. I think it was February, if I'm not mistaken. It was around the trade deadline, or it was around when we got Emmanuel quickly, January, February, around there. We just got flooded and flooded with so many super chats and so many views. And there was like that Scotty Barnes RJ video that went up huge. And yeah, there was just this month and a half to 2 months where our revenue was just insane. So yeah, part of that, of course, has gone into investing in the podcast, but a part of it did go into investing in my nostalgia. So it was a really cool thing to get for myself, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate this community for things like this, the super chats. Um, anyways, long story short, the Pistons have developed a bit of a reputation of being a team that maybe good people, in the NBA don't want to work at because you don't want to become associated with losing. I think this is a really important thing to realize, and why the Raptors have been so adamant about trying to stay competitive and not tanking for long enough periods of time. I think a lot of fans, they get hyped up about losing because they see Cooper Flag, they see AJ Debonsa, they see maybe Cameron Boozer, they see something like that, and they're just like, give it all up for that. And it's just like, the reality of the NBA is it works based on personnel, it works based on agents, it works on reputation, it works on that stuff. So I digress. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say the Pistons are probably going to be really bad next year. It doesn't really matter who they bring in. And the top 5 pick that they're going to bring in this year is not going to be of much service or help. They got rid of multiple second round picks in order to get rid of Marvin Bagley. Make it make sense, man. Unless there is a monumental shift in that organization's direction, I expect them to be bad for another few years. I'm very curious to see how this Cade Cunningham thing works out. I did see some flashes of improvement last year, which I think were encouraging. And if he can build on that, maybe he can become, I don't know, a top 70 player in the NBA. Maybe top 65. Ask yourself honestly, would you rather have him or Malik Monk? Really. If your only objective is winning basketball games next year, yeah. Um, yeah. What he said. Go back. Go back 30 minutes. Also, PTRX, thank you so much for I don't think I got a chance to thank you, but thank you so much for the championship banner that you got on the Amazon wish listing. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna find a way to get this bookshelf and this camera set up so that I can actually hang it up behind me. So thank you so much for that. Will Cade be top 50 above Fred VanVleet? Um, Fred VanVleet's a better player right now. I think a lot of people find it really hard to um understand that because it's so much more obvious what Cade brings to the table. But if you just straight swap winning, I think the Pistons win more games. I cannot imagine a Fred VanVleet led team losing 26 straight games. It's just impossible, right? So yeah. And Fred was awesome last year. He was really good. He was really good for them. And I think if you gave Fred the opportunity to run pick and roll with Jalen Duren, he would probably, do a much better job than Cade Cunningham. Nevertheless, Cade is approaching that year, 23, age 23, where, sometimes we do see a surprise pop from a prospect. I'm not a Cade hater. I'm just someone who was very early, to suggest that he's not going to be a franchise player. It's also pretty early to say Jalen Green was not going to be a franchise player. In my top 5 in the 2021 draft, I had Jalen Green below everybody. So, be interesting to see, how that turns out. But nevertheless, no boost expected for the Pistons. Now, the next topic up is NBA draft talk, and then we'll talk about Drake stands and tribalism. The NBA draft is less than 6 days away at this point. Well, at least round 1 is less than 6 days away. I think the Toronto Raptors have a golden opportunity here, and I am fully expecting someone incredible to fall to 19. If the board breaks the way I expect it to, I think the Raptors will have 2 top 15 prospects on the board at 19. Penny Hardaway saying East Missy, that would definitely be one of them, right? Bob Carrington, again, guys in that range. DeRon Holmes, Bob Carrington, Ease Misi. If you've cleared, any concept of him and, being a bit of a bust type player, I'm not thinking the Raptors are going to pick him, but, someone like Khalil Ware, you'll have an opportunity to pick a real mid first round talent in this draft. And I think that there is such a bunching up of talent and parity in the talent that there's also a chance that someone none of us think is going to be there, that player could be there too, like Nikola Topic, like a Ron Holland. There's a world in which at 19, you are picking between East Misi, Ron Holland, Nikola Topic, Isaiah Collier, and DeRon Holmes. That's a world that exists. It's possible. Do you trade down if both your top 15 available at 19? As in trade back? I don't understand the question. Sorry. Like would I go backwards in the draft? No. I would pick the one that I prefer most. And if it's a player, like look, every team has a draft board. Every single team, and the Raptors are no exception, right? They make a big board, and in most situations, unless something really crazy is happening and they can't figure out the medicals or the, what is the red flag or what's happening, they're going to go with whoever the best player available on their big board is. For the Toronto Raptors, who think already pretty differently, it doesn't really help that this draft is sort of locked and loaded with their types of prospects. But maybe that's a good thing, right? The things that you value the most are what is most represented in this draft in terms of skill set. Long, versatile, rangy wings with shooting questions is pretty much the epitome of this draft, right? Stretch bigs who can protect the paint. Yeah, there's quite a few of those guys too. Clan Home saying, based on the talent, how many bigs will be better than JP? Assuming you mean Jonte Porter. Honestly, Jonte Porter was really good for the Raptors last year, but he is north of 24, 25 years old. Really hard to say where these guys will be at 24, 25. Obviously, Jonte, with his injury concerns, he went undrafted. So we don't know, right? Like there is a chance, of course, of course. And here's an interesting outcome that I didn't think about until someone I was talking to who covers the draft a little bit more closely than I do talked about it today. And she was saying, "What do you think about Ryan Dunn as a center?" I thought, "Damn, that's interesting." There's another Raptors podcaster. God, uh, who suggested that Deron Holmes could be a wing, that he saw a small forward in Deron Holmes. Holy shit. That is next level stupidity. If Deron Holmes is a small forward to you, you need to get your eyes checked. You don't understand basketball. But it's nice to know that your center has some wing skills, and that's what Deron Holmes has. It doesn't mean he's going to be a wing. This is another one, actually. This is a great, great one. So Ryan Dunn and Jonathan Mogbo have so many Raptors-y traits, from wingspan to defensive upside versatility, that you almost wonder, number one, if they're there at 31, that's gotta be, yeah, yeah, he did. Um, you got to think if they're there at 31, this is going to be a very, very interesting position for the Raptors to be in. And I don't think there's a chance in hell they're passing on both those guys at 31. I don't want to say there's not a chance in hell. Who knows who else might be there at 31? But I feel like if Edie and those two guys are there, I think those two guys may be prioritized over the upside. With a guy like Ryan Dunn, especially if you project him to be a 4 or a small ball 5 at some point down the line. If those of you who don't remember, PJ Tucker was drafted as a 4 out of Texas by Brian Colangelo, right? And Mokbo, OG, and Scotty defensive front line. That would be interesting also. And again, you got to do something on offense. You got to be something, do something. Jonathan does two things incredibly well as a well, he actually does multiple things really well. He's a great rebounder, offensive rebounder. He is relentless. So he's going to be able to crash the glass for you in a really big way. Unlike Precious Achua, where you would say feel for the game is really bad and generally speaking, decision making is terrible. He doesn't have that affliction or problem. His decision making is actually quite good. And his feel for the game is incredible, even though his movements are a little bit rigid, right? And then on the other thing, he is just this massive screen setter, right? Which can create a lot of opportunities. You got to think about how the second unit will function. And I'm not saying this is the only consideration. Obviously, you consider a lot of other things, but hmm, if the Raptors traded up to top 10 lottery pick, who would you go for? Still Topic despite the injury? I think that's a loaded question because I mean you gotta consider who else is on the board. I'm not such a I think this question will lead very well into tribalism as well. Okay. We'll talk about tribalism, nationalism, and the stupidity of defending things based on likeness. Um that's another one. Ryan Dunn is the best cutter in this draft, in my opinion. Um he's up there. Yeah. He's very good. And he also probably has some screening upside, offensive rebounding upside, and just probably the best defender in this draft upside. So when you consider all those things linked together, you gotta project the floor, which is he's gonna be again, just yesterday or the day before, I said there's a world in which Ryan Dunn is probably not an NBA player, right? And that world does exist. It is a very slim outcome, right? Collier is arguably the better cutter. I wouldn't make that argument. We always make good decisions in the NBA draft. OG, Pascal, Fred, Norm, Barnes. The only two bad picks we've had are Jakob and Malachi Flynn, which we drafted over Desmond Bain. Jonathan, I don't think sorry, John, I don't think that Jakob was a bad pick just because Domantas Sabonis was better. I really don't. I understand that, Domas has turned into this all NBA guy, but it took quite a while for him to get there. It's very possible that the Toronto Raptors would have had to trade him just as they had to trade Jakob Poeltl to get their, championship center. So it doesn't necessarily. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but Jakob Poeltl is still a top 10 player in his draft, and you got him at 9. I don't necessarily think that's the worst thing. That being said, Malachi Flynn is not a top is Malachi Flynn a top 30 player in his draft? I think that would be worth examining. He's barely a top I think Malachi's probably a top 35 player, and you got him at 29. I think it's just the expectation that because the Raptors keep getting top 5 guys at, 50 and 40, that somehow they're just geniuses, and it's like, I'm telling you, nobody bats 100, right? The only 2 really bad picks for Masai Ujiri in this era really okay, well, 3 bad picks. I'll include David Johnson in there. I don't think you can consider Juan Hernandez. Juan Hernandez. No, DeJuan Hernandez. I don't think you can consider him necessarily a bad pick as the 59th. I don't think you can consider Jalen Harris a bad pick. He was was late. But really it's Bruno Caboclo and DeAndre Daniels. And they were only bad because when you go back and look at the 2013 draft, sorry, the 2014 draft, you see just how much incredible talent you passed on to get those guys. I think Bruno was picked over, was it Rudy Gobert? I have to look back on that draft. I try to avoid, but DeAndre Daniels over Spencer Dinwiddie, over Jeremy Grant, over Nikola Jokic is just it's hard to defend, especially because it's not even like, oh, we were looking for a wing. It's like, well, then fuck, draft Jeremy Grant. He's right there. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's exactly it. It was Clint Capella and Rudy Gobert, right? Was it Rudy Gobert as well? Wasn't Rudy Gobert part of that draft? Penny Hardaway saying Ryan Dunn is an amazing defender, definitely on the list at 19. I think he's on the list. I don't think he's at the top of the list at 19. So not Rudy. So Clint Capella. My bad. I think Rudy Gobert was like the 2013 draft. So it was Rudy and Giannis were in the same draft. Okay, there we go. That's it. Thank you so much. Anyways, I think the Raptors going to have an incredible, player fall in both positions. It's part of the draft where I feel like there's a real lottery talent that's going to fall to 19. I mean, it's happened a lot, right? Tyrese Maxey fell to 21. Cam Whitmore fell to 20 last year. So I mean, this is kind of the range in which you pick up scraps, right? And chances are because the draft is so full of players that you already like, the odds of a player you don't like falling to that place where you're like, yeah, I get he's a lottery talent, but we hate this type of player is probably not going to happen. It also probably helps that you have a pretty dynamic offense, right? And you have a lot of different needs. So you're not really locked in to, and you also have like a pretty flexible timeline. So it's not like you're the Denver Nuggets and you're just like, shit, we have so little money with all these guys on the court that we need to draft older players who are ready. I'm not saying that they will do that necessarily, but I'm saying like the incentive would strongly be there, right? I think the Raptors have this opportunity to draft an 18-year-old like Bob Carrington or a 22, 23-year-old like Tristan Da Silva, and I don't think it would swing them either way. Derp saying, when did Masai join the North? The Giannis draft? It was a year before the Giannis draft. So it was like the off season before. So it was the 2012, 2013 season, right? I'm not mistaken, right? He got like he was definitely there in the war room because I've seen it all. But um I know that after Brian Colangelo was let go, they had a holdover for a bit. It was Wayne Embry, if I'm not mistaken. He traded away he traded away Andrea Bargnani, right? And then I think it was towards the end of that 2013 year where Masai came in from Denver and he joined the Raptors. Um, Goat James better than old man MJ, that's for sure. What? No, Rob. Masai traded Bargnani. Um, I think you're wrong. I think you are wrong, friend. Hold on. Let me just check this out. I mean, this article says he traded him. So what was the deal that hold on. There was a holdover. Was it? Oh my god. Am I stupid? Okay, was it it was the my bad. So it was the gap between Rob Babcock and Brian Colangelo where somebody did something to clear some cap space. Was who was it? Was it trading Jalen Rose? Was that it? What am I thinking of? Huh. I think that was it. My bad. So yes, it was Masai Ujiri trading Andrea Bargnani. There, that's it. So it was Wayne Embry stepping in after Rob Babcock got passed over, and then Brian Colangelo came over from the Phoenix Suns. Masai turned Bargnani into Jakob. Embry was temporary GM, can't remember when. So he was temporary GM between um you know what else I'm thinking? Was it McCloskey? Why am I getting so confused here? I think it was Jack McCloskey who stepped in after Babcock was fired to be interim GM until Colangelo took over. And I think it was Embry who stepped in after Colangelo was fired until Masai took over. Right? And one of these guys made a really cap clearing move. I have to go back in Raptors history and think about this. Sorry. Something really weird's been happening over the last couple of days where I'm just like having like short term memory loss. I'm not really sure what's going on, but it was like really stupid shit. Like tonight, I asked my girlfriend like at 7 o'clock, when are you coming back? And apparently, she told me class ends at 9:30. Should be back by 10:30, 11. But for some reason, I thought I heard that she said that she's coming back at 9:30. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Like something like is. I'm usually pretty detail oriented about this stuff, and I'm usually like a bit of a Raptors encyclopedia in terms of like this happened and this happened. I used to play a game with my friends at a bar where they would ask me like the height and weight of a player or what college they went to. Like they'd be like Charlie Villanueva, and I'd be like UConn. They'd be like height, I'd be like 6'11", wingspan, and I'd be able to tell them what pick was he picked at, pick 7. You know what I mean? Like just encyclopedic knowledge. And right now, it's not feeling very encyclopedic. So maybe I'm just getting old. There we go. Yes, I do remember that. Um, I attended a Tim Lewicki lecture, changed my life. Really great guy. Jack was before Babcock, and I think he told him to draft Hoffa. Yes. In a literal heat wave, so who knows? That's true. Let's blame it on the heat. All right. Now let's talk final thing. No, wait. We got to round out the draft stuff. I remain extremely high on Yves Missi. I'm gonna say it right now. Yves Missi is like top 10 on my big board. Like he's really high up there. His driving potential and two-way positional versatility is insanity. The way he moves his hips and the way he moves his I feel like I'm describing a girl, like, oh, the way she moves her hips and the way she moves her feet. No. Like on the basketball court, the way this guy moves his feet the soccer is very evident, right? The fact that he's newer to basketball and the fact that he's already like his love and commitment for the game is just shining through. His intelligence shines through in every interview. I think he's the Raptors pick, man. Comche is intriguing. I might have watched the wrong games on him. I don't see intriguing. I see project. I see like long term project with 2 plays a game where you're like, holy shit. But I'm not enamored with 2 plays a game. With Ease Misi, you can see the constant energy, the constant focus, the constant attempts to figure things out. I'm really, yeah. Jordan, I'm a 55-year-old man who has recently started dating a 32-year-old young woman. Is this lady with daddy issues? Never at my age. I thought I'd be able to pull a woman in her 30s. Good times. Um, this is an interesting conversation. Um, I don't necessarily think so. I think there are a lot of women that prefer to date older men because they find men to generally be very immature. I myself, I went the other way. When I was 21, I dated a woman who was like nearly 30, um, precisely because I found women my age to be so freaking immature. I've never dated someone who was younger than me. I think I dated a girl who was younger than me when I was 16. She was 15. I think that's the only time. Otherwise, I always dated girls my age. But yeah, I understand that a lot of women do have an affinity for older guys. I have myself, when I was in my early 30s, I had a lot of girls who were in their early 20s, hitting me up and stuff. I'm in the film industry. I'm a director. I do stuff. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying like there are some opportunities that come your way, and women kind of toss themselves at you for whatever reason. I never found that too appealing, to be honest. I think relationships for me, a big part of relationships has been mental connections and growth. And I'm not saying that I haven't met some extremely intelligent, very smart women in there, but I've never decided to treat women like they were expired fruit. People call me gross. Cool. Who cares? I mean, maybe they call you gross because they're jealous. I mean, honestly, I'll tell you a story. So when I was 18, my uncle was commenting on one of my friends, and he was kind of talking about her in a way, and he's passed away since. So but he kind of just having a guy moment with me. He was just like, "Oh, she's damn sexy. You should ask her out and stuff." And I found myself kind of revolted by the idea of a 55-year-old man even objectifying or even talking about an 18-year-old girl. I thought that was really weird. And every single time I've witnessed this behavior, and again, 55 and 18 is a very big difference between 55 and 32, which I think is perfectly fine personally, right? Um, that's the other thing. That's the other thing, right? That's exactly it. If you want kids, right? And that is where, the biology of it all makes sense, right? Um, Gregory saying I just avoid dating, period. Yeah. When I'm 55, I want a young girlfriend too. You winning. I had a friend, when he was I'm gonna say 28, 29, he was dating 18-year-olds. Like he couldn't get over the idea of dating someone who was like 10, 12 years younger. And I think a lot of that comes down to just mentally, where are you, right? If you're a little bit stunted mentally, right? I'm not saying you are, and this is definitely not that case, but I'm saying if you're a 32-year-old who finds 18-year-olds really appealing to talk to, maybe you are stunted. And maybe since most of us subconsciously do not want to be rejected in any way or pressured and into made to feel inferior, and some of us are very touchy and somewhat sensitive to criticism, then maybe a man who hasn't really figured his shit out in his early 30s would disproportionately target dating women who are younger, who perhaps have fewer expectations of said man. Because, again, a lot of men, it's a lot of lies, right? Yeah, no shit. Yeah, it will. Um, a lot of men, they're looking to release the pressure off of themselves, right? I'm not looking to release pressure. I'm looking to increase pressure. I'm looking for a partner who's going to push me hard, right? I'm going to look for a partner who's going to call me on my bullshit. I'm looking for a partner where I make an excuse. She's like, no, it's not an excuse. It's harder to find for me women who are considerably younger than me who are going to put that type of pressure on me. I'm not, again, this is going to sound condescending. I'm just gonna say it. I'm a pretty intimidating person sometimes. I'm very I'm very confident in what I'm saying. I'm very stuck in my ways at times. So sometimes it requires someone who's extremely confident in themselves to push back without being intimidated. And that's a really good thing. So now I'm 36. And if my girlfriend and I were to break up, I don't necessarily think I would be dating someone who's 37. This is the first time in my life where I would date someone younger, but maybe 32, 33. I still don't think I'm going for like a 20-year-old. I don't know. Like I'm not ruling it out. I'm just saying I would I would feel kind of weird. 16 years, my junior. Like, what are we going to talk about? You know what I mean? Like, am I going to talk about Justin Bieber or whatever the fuck is going on Twitch? Like, I mean, it would have to be a very remarkable type of girl. I am no Leonardo DiCaprio, is what I'll say. Um, but that being said, a lot of men that I've talked to about this subject have told me that when I get way older, that I will want to date younger women. That if I was 55 and getting divorced, that I would be targeting dating someone who's 30 or 29. I don't know if that's the case. I very much doubt it. An 18-year-old and a 23-year-old are massively different. I mean, honestly, someone was telling me today that the age of consent in Ontario is 16 years old, which means that you can technically go and have sex with a 16-year-old and it would be technically legal as long as it was not a power position, i.e., if you were not her teacher or her boss or something. I think there's a list of things. I found that shocking. This is the first time I'd ever heard that the age of consent in Ontario was 16. I always thought it was 18. I come from the States. Where I grew up, it was 18. I understand in some countries it's even less. I was looking at, there's a country in Africa where the age of consent is literally 11. Um, well, 18 is just out of high school, 23 is done college and a full adult, in my opinion. Well, honestly, people grow at different stages. I'll tell you, to those of you who watched the neuroscience video that I did with my friend Catherine, when I met Catherine, let me see, how old was I? I was 26, she was 18, right? She was 19, I was 26. So we have a 7-year gap. I found her to be more mature than most of the girls that I knew. She was just in first year university. I found her to be more mature than almost every single girl that I was dating at that time. So I don't think that this is a definitive thing. And she is. She is really that remarkably mature. People mature at different times. When I was 13 or 14, I feel like I was a lot more mature than a lot of the adults I know today. So again, people are different. They grow at different times. And honestly, if you've ever been to a club and you bumped into a 50-year-old who turned around and be like, "You wanna go? You wanna go?" You know that not all grown people are actually grown. To me, you're not officially an adult till 21. Great. To me, you're not an adult until your brain stops growing, which is 25. So, or maybe you're an adult at 18. I don't know. Depends on which way you want to look at it. Point being, this is a great segue into the Drake conversation. And this is just going to be the final chapter of this. I spent a lot of time today reflecting on my own thoughts about this, bump into some more Kendrick Lamar tracks, you know, um, listening to that entire concert all over again. And a lot of people, were hitting me up my DMs, really angry, mostly white people. Just gonna throw that out there. Not that it means anything, but mostly it was just, Drake stans and apologists and saying like, "Yo, Drake put up for the city, Drake put up for the six, Drake put up for the," and it got me thinking. I was like, "All right, I get it. He is a massive tourism draw." I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I read it somewhere today that he is responsible for like 5% of Canada's tourism income. That's fucking crazy. That is crazy. And I also realized that, hey man, like it's not the first person in the world to have allegations tossed at him and to be found innocent. I doubt he's innocent, but hey, like I mean, guilty until prove innocent until proven guilty is the law, right? But I think people misunderstood what I was saying yesterday or this morning. I think a lot of people took it to be, hey, this is what Kendrick said. If what Kendrick said is true, you know, we need to get rid of Drake. I think it's more like I don't even care if what Kendrick said is true. Like, you just need to get rid of Drake. Like, you need to get rid of this association you have with him. You don't consider you are like in a very weird position as the Toronto Raptors. You're trying to change your culture, right? This is a team that in Tampa and in the bubble spearheaded the Black Lives Matter movement. They had a big Black Lives Matter bus. Do Black Lives matter or do they not matter? I don't know. Do they? Do they to the Toronto Raptors? Do they actually matter? Well, if they do matter, then maybe consider the sentiments of the people that you are supposedly trying to save, right? How is the culture feeling about him? I think that matters, right? Are you progressive about women? All the talk around the Toronto Raptors is like, oh, we don't want character issues. We don't want this, whatever, whatever, right? Okay, sure, right? We want all of that, right? We want to be progressive. We want to be a team that does not have character defects. Got rid of Jalen Harris, no problem. Right away. Terrence Davis, got rid of him. Jonte Porter, got rid of him, right? Jonte Porter, you had no choice, but like, okay, so you want to keep your noses clean, right? Ime Udoka apparently didn't want to come here because he cheated on his wife. Bro, what are we talking about here? So on the one hand, hold up, hold up, hold up. On the one hand, man who cheated on his wife. I don't know how you cheat on Nia Long, bro, but I guess I don't know because I'm not there. Cannot imagine a man cheating on Nia Long. I'm just gonna say that out there. Like, I mean, I grew up very big crush on that woman, but my point is, you have a coach who just allegedly felt that Toronto was too liberal for a philanderer. But apparently, Toronto is not too liberal for whatever Drake is accused of, which is a massive double standard to me. The other thing that I heard over and over and over again was look at how the West Coast and look at all the gangs showing support for Kendrick. Look at DeMar coming out, all the East, all the West Coast showing up for DeMar. We got to rep Drake just as hard. Like, this to me is stupid and it's tribalism, and I don't stand for it. Let me be honest with you. I grew up on the East Coast. I've always been on the East Coast. When I wasn't in Europe, I've been on the East Coast. I've never lived on the West Coast in my life. I never lived in Vancouver. I never lived in Seattle. Never lived in LA. Never lived in San Fran. Never lived in Oakland. Never. Okay. I've never even lived in the Midwest. I mean, I think the closest we ever got was like Nashville and Pennsylvania is the closest I've ever moved away from the Atlantic Ocean. I've always been on the East Coast. I've always been in this time zone. So when I was growing up, it was like the Pac and Biggie thing. And Pac was the West Coast and Biggie was the East Coast. And man, I just like Pac. I don't care. You think coastal rivalry, like what ocean I go to is going to determine what fucking artist I like? And sure, there's pressure from everyone in your school to be like, yo, how you bumping with that guy? And this is the East Coast, West Coast, blah, blah, blah. And I don't care. I just don't care. You know what I mean? I don't care. I don't care about this stuff. I will always be an independent thinker. That's why I can talk shit about Fred VanVleet while he's still on the team that I root for, because I don't fuck with him. I don't fuck with what he stands for as a basketball player and as a man. I just don't like his values. And so it doesn't matter that he wears the same jersey that I root for. You know what I mean? And it's the same reason why I can be overly critical of certain, nationalist agendas from Serbia. I have a lot of Serbian friends that will never ever criticize Serbia in a public space. They would never say anything bad about the 90s and the 80s. They would never say bad anything about any of the past presidents. They just don't want to talk about it. I remember, damn it, I remember when I think I was like, what was I, 14 or 15, 16, 17? No, dude, I was 17 years old. George Bush got elected, right? President. And I was just going off and off about how he's such a fucking moron. And I thought he was so stupid. And my aunt goes, that's our president you're talking about. And I was like, I don't care. I don't care. What the fuck do I care if you're president? Yeah, I'm a US citizen. Who cares? You think I would shy away from saying Justin Trudeau is a fucking asshole because he's a Canadian prime minister? I don't care. And we worked so hard for freedom of speech. Why would you suppress it? Maybe some of y'all should suppress it. I'm not going to lie. But so my point is, You don't get to buy my loyalty because we come from the same city. Now, to those of you who are like, "Yo, Drake put up for the 6." Drake put Toronto on the map. All that bullshit. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Yeah, I mean, maybe it gave you some sense of like hip hop culture or whatever, but like, I mean, honestly, the people who are actually in the culture and people who are in the business, I don't think they've ever liked him. I really don't. I think every single person I know who's actually into hardcore hip hop has always found him to be fucking corny as hell. The people who are listening to his streams are fucking teenage white girls who want to feel cool because they're listening to rap music. It's a perversion. It's pop. You understand? Like I remember, The Office, they had this line where they said, like the Black Eyed Peas, they said it's rap for people who don't like rap, and it's what was it, like pop for people who don't like pop. I think Drake is like music for people who don't like music. You know what I mean? Like headlines is a bumper. I get it. There've been some really, really, Kiki, do you love me? Whatever. Like there's been some good tracks. You can dance to it. That's cool. But if you're looking for substance in this guy's work, are you crazy? This dude's comparing himself to Jay-Z. Are you fucking kidding me? Jay-Z? That's Mount Rushmore talk, man. Dre, Kendrick, that's real artist shit, man. So, you're an actor. Stick to acting, right? You can't just fake your ass into this. So to me, it's like, whatever. You want to root for him, whatever. But don't give me all this nonsense about like, oh, if you're for Toronto, you're gonna root for Drake. No, man. Root for the weekend. Root for the weekend. I love the weekend. Okay? Great music. KRS-One. Oh, thank God. Clearly a person who understands music up in here, right? I mean, actually go and listen to the music and tell me what you find so great. Kanye, fucking genius. Musically, genius. Personally, a little messy. But I mean, okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing, man. You think I feel a little bit guilty about rocking out, singing World's Greatest, like R. Kelly, and after everything that came out about R. Kelly, you don't think I was like, when I was a young kid, you don't think I like bumped up a little bit to Diddy and like some of those tracks? Of course I did, man. I'm not like, I mean, shit, anyone who went to a club did, right? You can feel guilty about it, but fine. You can differentiate between the person and the artist. I've struggled with this a lot with Roman Polanski, right? After everything that came out about Roman Polanski and everything that's come out about God, Woody Allen, right? With their grooming of young women and all that stuff. To me, personally, even if those two have made some of my favorite films, Woody Allen made Match Point, Roman Polanski, he made The Pianist, one of my favorite films, Rosemary's Baby, one of my favorite films. I'll be honest, really hard to watch those films. It's really hard to watch those films for me. It used to be like I could draw a division and say their work is their work and their personality is their personality. I don't know the person. I'm just listening to the work. A part of me also feels like a filmmaker does not make music, or sorry, filmmaker did not make the film by themselves. Why should the actors and the cinematographer and the editor and all those people penalized? Why should their work be canceled because this one asshole director did this thing? But the director is the vision, and especially if they're the writer, it's their story. It's hard. It's hard for me. The Pianist is still one of my favorite films, but it's hard. Rosemary's Baby is still a classic. It's just hard. It's hard. And I've met some of these directors that I've looked up to through Pendants, through other things, through TIFF, whatever. I've met some of these people. Some of them are actually really nice people. Some of them are fucking horrible. And the ones that are horrible, it's also really hard to look at their work. I'm gonna be honest. Like when I see their film pop up, maybe I don't watch it. But with Drake, there was nothing musically there. Do you understand what I'm saying? If I had to count the 100 musicians in my lifetime that have made the biggest impact on me, and by the way, we're talking so many different languages here. We're talking Spanish musicians, like Juanes, we're talking Serbian musicians, we're talking Italian musicians, we're talking English speaking musicians, we're talking Persian and Turkish musicians that I've listened to because I grew up in a very eclectic and very diverse high school. I think all of those things put together, I don't think Drake makes my top 200 in terms of music. that has actually impacted my soul. Kendrick probably makes top 20 all time for me. So it's different. That's another one. If you look at some of Drake's lyrics, it's pretty sus. Facts. Arden saying, Rob, we're just getting old. Drake's been an ambassador since 2013 and has been pandering to the same age group the whole time. The 18 to 25 from 15 years ago aren't the same as us. Hmm. Maroon Prince. Wow. City of God changed my life, but I think there's a discussion to be had about the employment of young actors from tough situations and not taking ownership of their life and growth after the film. Yep. That has certainly been a bit of a moral conundrum for anyone who's made that type of film. But yes, City of God is a masterpiece. Derp saying only Denzel, Hopkins, and maybe Keanu seem like real people out of the sea of Holly weirdos. Denzel for sure. You know, my girlfriend was asking me the other day, she said, if you could meet any person in Hollywood, who would it be? Right. And I've met a few people. I met one of my favorite actors on a Zoom call like a couple years ago. It was really cool. He was a really nice dude. But I started going down the list and I came up with all these names. And then at some point I was just like, what the fuck am I talking about? Denzel. Number one, Denzel. It would be Denzel over everything. Drake texting 14-year-old Millie Bobby Brown about relationship is sus. Yeah. So here's the thing. If you're going to be an organization that panders to women, right? That is going to, make a thing about black culture and black people. Okay, hold on. I got to talk about this for a sec because you know what? I'm not black and maybe I don't represent Black America. I definitely don't represent Black America, and I don't represent Black people at all. But I hear the struggle, and I hear what they're saying, and I just want to echo some of the criticisms here. This is not me being offended; it's me watching people take offense to something, which I fully understand why it's offensive. American, like African American culture in the United States, in Memphis, in Chicago, in Inglewood, wherever we're talking, okay, in New York City, in Bronx, whatever, Brooklyn. Talk to anyone who's from there, they can probably articulate exactly the vernacular, the lingo, the words, it's all itself, right? Toronto would argue that they have their own version of it, right? There's a lingo, there's a way people speak, there's a particular, set of codes, right? That code is not to be stolen. It's not to be adopted. You don't get to be from somewhere that you're not from, right? Because it's it's popular or it sells, or because you're an actor, who worked on Degrassi and you're really good at playing roles, right? You don't get to walk around in Atlanta, right? There are clips of Drake literally going back like 15 years where he's making fun of people who talk the way he talks now. That's some real suspect bullshit, bro. I tell you what, right now, you can I'll guarantee you this. If you taped every word I said for my entire life, yes, I'd be embarrassed about some of the shit I said. 100%. But if you taped every fucking word I've said in my entire life, you have never heard me make fun of people for talking a certain way, whether that be an accent, whether that be a language barrier, whatever. I think that's just suspect as fuck. And then, it's one thing, like, again, when you are able to use your privilege in both sides of the equation, like that to me is frustrating for anybody, right? Like now I'm a dual citizen. I'm an American and a Canadian, right? Now I want you to imagine that as an American, right? I get to use my privilege as an American or whatever to play the American card whenever I want and then play the Canadian card wherever I want. You know what I mean? Like it's not nearly the same thing. I don't know. You imagine somebody who can code switch this way and then utilize their um, position as a minority only to their economic advantage, right? Like to sell it, like to sell some synthetic version of it. I mean, we are living in a world where people are increasingly filters, fake, 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 right? I've talked to people who are in this life, who are in the influencer world and whatever, and it's just like it's a constant grind to keep up this illusion of fakeness. To the point where if you saw some of your favorite influencers in real life, my God, you wouldn't even recognize them, right? These people are just fake. It's plastic surgery. It's all this shit, right? It's edited. It's like filtered, and it's just fake. It's fake fucking crap. And so your whole life is fake. Your entire impression is fake. No wonder you're attracting fakeness, right? If you're going to the Toronto Raptors, if you're trying to build authentic culture, which clearly you are, right? I don't think Masai Ujiri is fake, man. Everything that guy, like every time I've listened to a lecture or a speech with him, like I feel like he's genuinely about what he's about. You know what I mean? So I think like if anyone gets what I'm talking about, it's probably him, right? If you're gonna pander to women and minorities and all this stuff, right? And you have a person on your payroll or on your team or representing your city where, representing your team where he just gets to show up and go on broadcasts, and you're naming you're designing jerseys after his color, and you named your training facility after him, and you got his fucking owl merchandise everywhere because it was a business opportunity, right? At the moment, it was a business opportunity. It wasn't altruism. Drake was fucking huge. He's the biggest artist in the world. And I get a lot of people in Toronto are really, really proud of that. And you can be proud of that without being blind to it. You can support the fact, you know, if you're Jewish and you want some sort of pride over the fact that the greatest movie producer, or the most successful movie producer, one of the most successful producers ever, Harvey Weinstein was Jewish or Jewish American, you can take pride in that. Just understand that he did some fucking horrible ass shit. Okay. Like you can take both, right? Right? You can be black and be really proud of all the barriers that Bill Cosby broke. And you can be an African American and be really proud of that, but also accept the other side of it. That he was a fucking horrible human being who did some really horrible shit. You can be a comedian who's bald and fat and be really, really proud that Louis C.K. made it, but also accept that he's fucking done some horrible ass shit. So here's what I'm saying. You can be really proud of the fact that Drake made it out of Toronto, out of Forest Hill, whatever, popularized a lot of Toronto stuff, made a lot of artists famous, like 21 Savage and all that stuff. Like he made a lot of people famous, and he took up some Toronto people as well. There's some people who make music videos for him that blew up huge, making music videos for other people. There's been like directors that are connected to him, like Director X and all those people. Like, so there's a lot of people that he brought up, and he brought these people down to Miami, and he paid for them, and he brought them down to LA, and he's got his own posse and crew. And I'm sure like, he's funding a lot, and he brings a lot of money into Canada. You can accept all of that and be really, really proud of all of that. But at the same time, accept the other side of it too. Accept who he's connected to. Accept, what relationship he has had with the people around him, including some of the younger women in his life, right? Ask yourself. I want you to ask yourself, if you're a 36 or 37-year-old man, like I'm a 36-year-old man, I want you to ask yourself what a conversation with a 13 or 14-year-old, even one as impressive and as mature as Millie Bobby Brown or Billie Eilish, I want you to ask yourself what that conversation would look like, what you would want to talk to, and how many times you might message that person in their DMs. I got to tell you, I've known a couple of girls who, we were at that age, 13, 14 together, and they had some older guys in their life, maybe some guys from, 2, 3 grades ahead. But once in a while, they would have a guy who was in university. And I didn't know better at the time. When I was 13 or 14, what the fuck do I know, right? I didn't judge. And she said, I'm dating this guy who's first year university. I didn't judge it too hard. She's 15, he's 19, everyone hush hush about it. And then later, when I would continue to talk to those women, sometimes they would talk to me about how they felt that they were groomed, how there was a control dynamic in that relationship where they felt very suppressed. And I got to tell you that young minds are very impressionable and extremely easily influenced. And I will never support someone who manipulates that or can exploit that for their personal gratification or gain, right? You also have to consider the people around him, some of their track records, some of their legal troubles. I think you also have to consider his father and some of the things that people have said around him, and some of the things I know people have said about his father, and going to some of his parties. So look, to me, this is a business decision that has turned not profitable for the Raptors. Okay. That's just truth. You drew this partnership because it legitimized you with this We the North brand and, popularized you maybe with American athletes. But this is low hanging fruit. This is low hanging fruit, okay? I got to tell you, and I'll start this. Rob, we know we all listening to Meet the Grams. Yeah, listen to Euphoria, bro. Like, damn, bro. Like, Jesus. I remember Hit 'em Up when Hit 'em Up dropped. I thought no one in the world has ever murdered someone on a diss track better than me, Hit 'em Up, but I think Kendrick took the cake there, bro. Rest in peace, Tupac, but, like, that was crazy to me. That's just crazy. Um, damn, what was I gonna say? There's complicity at every level, but careerism keeps the code of silence. Yeah, it needs to break. It needs to break. It needs to break in a big way. Damn, what was I gonna say? I had a kinda like a parting note, and then I lost my train of thought with this. Hmm. I think I was talking about hit 'em up, rap this. See, short-term memory, really, really phasing out. I was talking to someone the other day about, like, doing live streams, and, she was like, "It's really intimidating to go on unedited because you can fuck up, you can say something." I think this has been very cathartic for me. Initially, I used to say that I never wanted to do live streams because I thought they were corny or whatever. But the truth is, I don't think I thought they were corny. I think deep down, I thought that they were really intimidating because, I screwed up so many times. I was new to speaking on the mic. I was like, man, what if I say, what if I lose my train of thought? What if I say something stupid? What if I can't remember a fact and everyone says I'm dumb? I took a lot of scrutiny actually as a podcaster and as a content creator to the point where, man, I'm not even trying to draw attention to myself, but I've been right about so many fucking things with the Toronto Raptors. Holy shit. And to this day, when I am referenced on X or on Reddit or a real GM, there's always a preface. I know he's controversial, but here's this other thing he was right about. I know what's so fucking controversial? What am I saying that's so fucking controversial? What's so controversial? I said Pascal Siakam's not a superstar. Y'all agree now? Yeah. It was controversial at the time, right? When y'all were talking about him as MVP, but it's not controversial. I said Fred VanVleet was about himself before it became popular, right? I said Scotty Barnes is definitely going to be the pick for the Toronto Raptors. Was that controversial? I said Scotty was really good. I said Jakob Pertl trade was going to backfire. Bro, like I'm batting 1,000 here. No, I'm not batting 1,000. I'm not batting 1,000. Yes, I've been wrong about a few things. Yes. But I've been right about a lot of things. I've been right about a lot of things because I don't think too much about what people want me to say or how. And I think a lot of that has come from just overcoming my fears of intense social ridicule. You know what I mean? You're talking about low hanging fruit. Bro, your controversy brought me. Yeah. Um, anyways, I'm glad that I've taken a more peaceful route at this point. I've always identified with Kendrick's process in general. If there is a rapper that I would love to meet, it is Kendrick Lamar. And honestly, my neighbor often blasts Drake music, so you better believe I had Euphoria pumping, like, for half an hour straight on loop. And, I don't think I'm gonna be getting a Christmas basket this year because that shit was real loud. It was really funny too. Um, I really wanna get to the fucking thing. What was I saying? The low hanging fruit. Yes, got it. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Where is it? Matt 319. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. You got me back to the thing I wanted to talk about. The low hanging fruit. So here's the thing. I always wanted to create a film festival that was about films. This was my biggest beef with a lot of film festivals I attended with my own films, that they weren't really about the filmmakers, they weren't about the audience, they were just about the celebrities. So I went to a film festival in 2018 or whatever, and Tommy Wiseau was there, and a couple of other celebrities were there, and it just felt like an afterthought. And I realized I'm no one important. I'm just a guy with a film. I made a film and, we made it for very little money and I flew down to Florida to be there. But I just thought, why is this guy a million times more important than me? Why are we treating people differently because this person has a lot of money? Is he like why do we have to do this way? Me personally, I'm not going to treat you differently because you have $1 billion or like $10. I just I'm not going to be that way. I wasn't raised that way. I don't respect people who are like that. I'm going to treat you the same way if you're a bus driver or if you're a mechanic or if you're a rich suit. Probably I'm going to be even nicer to you if you're a bus driver or a mechanic. I mean, to be honest. But that being said, I never really understood that notion of putting people above people because it was marketable. But I was quickly told that, hey, if you want people to come to your festival, if you want people to show up, if you want sponsorships, you're going to have to play ball. So it's a couple things you're going to have to do. Number one, in order to get the sponsors that you want your Canada Arts Council, you want your, Canadian partners and Bell Media and all this stuff, you're going to have to, satisfy diversity quotas, right? The number two thing was, if you want those big money sponsors and stuff, you're going to have to prioritize celebrities. You're going to be able to, you're going to be able to attract people to things. But then when I go to a festival like TIFF, or I go to a festival like where the stars are the main thing, I realize that there is a very strange thing happening at these places where people are coming to take photos of the stars, but not watch the films. And I always wondered how the filmmakers felt about it until I was the filmmaker in that situation. And I did not feel very good about that at all. And so I said, no, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it the other way. And they said, there is no other way. There's literally, this is the only way you can ever be successful as a film festival, which is to do it this way. Ironically, when we started Pensar Basketball, there were a lot of people, in the Toronto media space who I don't want to say I was directly plugged into, but I knew people who were very, very plugged into those people. And early on, there was a lot of feedback that came my way, especially when Pensar Basketball was not very controversial and we were just doing like small little videos. There were people who were like, hey, let's collab, let's do it this, let's do it that, come work for us, come guest on our show. And there was like a notion of you got to pay your dues. You got to go through this process, then you got to go through this internship, you got to take a shit wage for an entire year. And when I turned down some of those offers and told those people that I can make more money by myself, they were just like, who the fuck do you think you are? Like, who the fuck do you think you are? And I just thought, well, who the fuck do you think? And it's weird because I was asking the same question. Like, who the fuck do you think I am? Offering me this little ass money to fucking make your content for you. Like, who the fuck do you think I am? You think you know what I mean? Like that notion of like, who do you think you are versus who do you think I am is probably the exact same reason that The Weeknd didn't sign to OVO, because he believed in himself. He believed in himself as an artist, and he was right. Right? It's probably a reason why a lot of people, did bitch out and bend for Drake, right? Because he's a cash cow. Someone told me after year one, when we were very polarizing in this channel, they said, man, I had screenshotted and I deleted it, but I should have kept it. But if you've been around the channel, you know that you've seen this comment several times where you heard somebody say, watch, now that Rob's, every podcaster starts out this way and then they all turn corporate. Wait until he gets sponsorships. Wait until he gets this. Wait until he gets that. And I always said the same thing. I'm never changing. Like, I'll change in a way, like I'll evolve as a human being, but I'm never selling out. Like, I'm never going to do it. And one day my girlfriend, I was talking to her about this and she said, how much would Rogers have to pay you to come work for them? How much, like, what if you became really, really successful and you became really good at this? And she'll never understand me on this level. This unfortunate part of our relationship is sometimes she doesn't understand like how I think about stuff like this. And she said, well, what if they came up to you and gave you $50,000? And I was like, not for sale. She was like, what if they give you $100,000? I'm like, not for sale. She's like, what if they give you $200,000? I'm like, let's not get crazy. No one's giving me $200,000 to talk on a microphone. This is a dead space in terms of money. Like, you don't even know how much these people are working for SportsCenter are making, but they're not making 200,000. She's like, what if they paid you 200,000? What if they thought you were so special? And I was like, I'm not for sale. And she said, what about $1 million, Rob? Will you turn down $1 million to go work for SportsCenter? I said, I'm not for fucking sale. I'm not for sale. And I say the same thing with the film festival. And I say the same thing with this podcast. And I don't respect people that are for sale. All right. I don't. And I never will. Okay. Now you can say that's stubborn, and damn well, I'm sure that I've cost myself hundreds of thousands of dollars in my life because I refuse to play ball and I refuse to play the politics game. And I'm not going to talk shit about someone just because you are cool and I need your money and you're talking about somebody that I like in front of me. I'm going to tell you to stop because my parents passed away when they were 44 and 50. They are the youngest. Well, not the youngest. My mom was the youngest of 3 sisters. My dad was the second oldest of 4 brothers. All of their siblings are still alive. All of them. What my parents lacked was not luck, it was peace. They made each other miserable for many years. They probably made a lot of other people miserable as well. They tried their best, but ultimately they passed. They were also the only people who got divorced in the entire thing. We were only people who were poor. We were poor. It was a very weird thing to grow up with a family that was poor when you know your extended family is balling and pretty rich and pretty well to do. And I was very happy because once in a while they would take you on a trip and you would have this experience, you know, where you get to visit their home for an entire month and you got tennis classes, but then you go back to government housing and you go back to the projects. And it was very weird. I was like almost like a Fresh Prince of Bel Air situation, you know, not quite Bel Air, but wealthy and then poor, wealthy and poor. It was interesting. I don't think your soul should be for sale. I don't think your integrity should be for sale. And you know, we've done pen dance this way for 8 years. And last year, I gotta tell you, people who came to pen dance said it was the best experience of their lives. Like the artists, the filmmakers, they said this is a wholly unique experience. We've been to this festival, that festival. Yeah, they're bigger. Yeah, they're more money, whatever. They paid us more. But this is like the one that I felt the most connected to. This is the one, whatever, right? And now I'm looking at the company that tried to lowball me, and there's 2 of them actually. I've often talked about one, but there's 2 companies that tried to lowball me when I was starting out in this space, and they both told me that I was not gonna make it, that I was gonna wait for years and years before I could ever make as much money as they were offering me at that time, and I said, "Bet." Pensar Basketball is bigger than both those companies combined right now. In terms of views over the last 2 years, we have outpaced both those companies combined. So if you were ever wondering why I like Kendrick Lamar, that's why I like Kendrick Lamar, right? That's why. Because to me, it's like I'm not about that either. I'm not about social media. I'm not really about, you know, the fame and all that stuff. In fact, the biggest hurdle of all of this is putting my face on this. This to me is the worst. I hate it. Like I'm doing it precisely because I want to create a connection and I think that I have, you know, something to give this space. But I don't like the fact that I'm not you're never gonna see me on an ad, I'll tell you that. Like, this is the last part of it that makes sense. To me, the part that makes sense to me and the part that is, like, good for me and is the growth opportunities, the connection opportunities, it's not the corporate climbing and the money and stuff, like, whatever, man. Yes, I'm happy when people drop a super chat or whatever, it's great. Fuck, I'm not stupid. I do like money, you know? But there's no fucking way that I'm about to make a certain type of content because it gets money. You know what I mean? I hope that makes sense. So I just feel like your soul should not be for sale. And it's like if you ever wondered like why I do not fuck with Drake or why I don't like Drake, it's because I always felt like his soul was. And I don't like people like that. I don't like people who let money and market determine their content value. You can't call yourself an artist if you're like that. You know what I mean? Like I've met artists where they will take a loss. Like straight up, there was an artist. I'm not going to name names, but he's a really good director in Canada. And he had this script that nobody wanted to greenlight. Nobody. And he found this independent studio to greenlight it. And they said, we really can't offer you very much money. They gave him like bare bones budget. And he just said, that's what I want to do. And he turned down a really big project from a Canadian studio that's like going to net him like a lot of money. And he did that for that, right? He did it because that was the story that he believed in, and he didn't like what the other company, the bigger studio that everyone's heard of and everyone has on their television. I'm not going to name names, but that company wanted to strip away elements of the story that were very important to him. This other studio was not going to be so controlling about it. He wanted to make the story his way, and he left money on the table. And I'm not saying that because you leave money on the table, you're a martyr or whatever, but I'm just saying, like, if you're about what you're about, just be about what you're about. Like, I don't want to have to wonder, you know what I mean? Like, I've spent a lot of my life wondering if people tell me one thing and then they go tell somebody else one thing, you know what I mean? Like those type of people that are like fake friends, you know? If you know about this Drake shit, I want you to ask yourself 2 questions. Would you trust him with your girl? Would you trust him with your daughter? Right? Just ask yourself that. And if you say no to either one, ask yourself why. I wouldn't trust him. I wouldn't trust him. I really wouldn't. You know what I mean? And there are some of those people, in my opinion. And I've seen those people. Fuck, we all have. We have met those people. You know, those sneaky ass bitches who when they are when the cards are when there is no consequence for what they can do, right? There's no moral consequences. Like, they're morally bankrupt people. Like, they don't answer to anybody because they're godless, right? Like, it's like better or worse, but not good and bad. Like, you gotta have, in my opinion, you gotta have like some sort of good and bad in you, right? Like, this is good and this is bad. Like, I'm not saying like be super rigid about it, and I'm not saying be biblical about it, but like have a compass. You know, this is a good thing, this is a bad thing. But if everything is better or worse, man, you are on a fucking path to hell. Straight up. If everything is better or worse, will I get caught? Will I not get caught? Is it legal? Is it defensible? Do I have the money to get away with this? Man, you're straight up going to hell. Um, I'll tell you why at the end of the day, I cannot sell out or accept money for things that I do not believe in. That I ranted this morning about why I'll never take money from gambling apps, the same situation. Because while I am not for sale, what's most important is my peace of mind is not for sale. I do not compromise in that situation, which means if I don't like you, I'm not going to pretend to like you, even if it is socially advantageous to do that. And I'm not trying to be a leader of men or anything, but I'm just asking you if you're a person who's ever lacked the courage or wondered if you ever had the courage to just speak your mind honestly and just tell people when you're angry that you're angry instead of suppressing it, and tell people when you're pissed off that you're pissed off, or when you're upset that you're upset, or if you want to go cry, fuck, like don't let people stop you from that, right? Go through the process. Stop stopping the process. So I find that a lot of people, you know, they go through life like wondering what they can and cannot do, what is socially advantageous and beneficial, and it's taking you out of the present moment. The present moment is you are upset, be upset. And the present moment, you know, I feel like when you try to calculate too much, right, of your life out, like, well, if I say this thing about this person, then this person will like me. It's like, bro, your life is so fucking complicated. Give this video a like if you know a person who has to verify in their own mind what version of the story they're supposed to be telling. You know what I mean? Like, they have like 6 different versions of the same story, and they tell a different version to every fucking person based on who they're talking to. Give this video a like if you know a person like that. You know what I mean? Like, that's exactly it. You know, my girlfriend actually watches these sometimes. Like, she watched my Drake pod this morning, and it's interesting, right? Like, it keeps you honest. It keeps you really honest, and it's not even like it keeps you honest, but it gives you like instant feedback because you have this person that you talk to every single day, and on this pod, you have a community that you're talking to. Can you imagine like how awkward? I don't know if other people think about this. I cannot imagine how awkward it would be for her to come on here and see a completely different person. Like, you know what I mean? Like a different person describing a completely you know, the same set of events in a completely different way. I cannot imagine me having a bad day for an entire day, her knowing about that, and me coming on and pretending I had a great day. I can't imagine that. Now, it's much less, you know, much more severe things, but even that feels like, wow, well, she would think I was fucking crazy or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think life needs to be that complicated. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, they are. All industry is predatory. There's a casting couch in every media field and corporate world. Power corrupts the soul. I agree. I agree. It does. It really does. And it has a tendency to. But you know what? I don't think it's power corrupts the soul. I think power exposes the soul. There's a lot of people in this world that would act differently if they had a little bit of money, a little bit of power, a little bit of muscle, right? What would you do? Like, be honest with yourself. What would you do if you could get away with some of the heinous things that this dude has done, or that people have? Would you do it if you could exploit? If you had the job opportunities, the money, the lawyers, whatever, would you exploit young women who are desperate for a job or just desperate for an opportunity? Most of us will never know, right? Most of us will never be in the position to have that type of power, right? I remember, when all these, allegations came out about Bill Clinton, there was like a lot of like old governors and stuff like, this is morally reprehensible. This guy is so bad. He's unpresidential. And it's just like, bro, first of all, he's an extremely charming guy. And a lot of women seemed to like him, right? He was tall, he was, well spoken prior to, like, and he's the president. Like you an old 80-year-old, you don't even know what this level of temptation is like. Like, I don't know what athletes go through. So I'm gonna sit here and judge an athlete for cheating on their wife necessarily. I'm not judging him. I wouldn't do it myself. But it's like, what do I know about like 800 women throwing themselves at me every single day in my DMs? Like, I have no idea. I have no exposure to that level of temptation. But I would like to think that ultimately money and power do not corrupt, they expose. Who are you will be shown to you once you are in a position to do whatever the fuck you want. There's there's an old thing. It's a philosophical text. Actually, it's called Gaiji's Ring. Check it out. Read it. The Gaiji's Ring. It's incredible. It's a great parable, or man, I wonder if at some point I could turn these late night sessions into a philosophical thing, because I would love to talk about Plato's allegory of the cave and Gaiji's ring someday. But I do think that that would be an incredible, thing to learn together or even teach. But ultimately, if you could, right? Like the allegation between, Wayne's girl, it's not really even an allegation really at this point. It's been proven fact. You imagine a guy brings you into the industry, gives you all that credit, gives you all that love and everything, and then he goes to jail for a bit and you fuck his girl. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine doing that and sleeping at night? I don't even know how these people sleep. I don't know what pillows they use, but I don't know how you sleep after doing that. That's really fucked up, right? But I think there's a lot of people out there who act like they're good people because they don't have the opportunity to be bad people. Or maybe they don't have the courage to be bad people, right? And there's a lot of people out there who are like, I would do this horrible thing to this person. I would go and punch this person in the face. I'd go punch my boss in the face or whatever, but I don't have the courage and I can't lose my job, so I'm not going to, right? Like that. But if they could, uh, yeah, that would be a scary world, right? So I think that's the interesting thing is like when you're rich and powerful and when you get into a position of power, you really do you get real you get to know yourself really well is what I'm saying. And yeah, I mean, I've never been in a position of like ah super high level power or whatever. I've had some modicum of power in my life. I've been a boss, I've been an employer, whatever. I've been you know, a leader of things, I guess, a CEO, whatever the fuck. I've been a director. I've been in a lot of leadership chairs in my life. And yeah, sometimes you do get that feeling, when you come across an 18-year-old who's super wide-eyed, or 19 or 20-year-old who's super wide-eyed, and she's like, "What can I do to get this part?" And you're just like, "Oof, if I was a horrible person, there's probably something horrible to be done here." Um, but at that point, I think that's when you have to get square with God. I think that's probably when you determine who you actually are as a person, because it's only when you can get away with something and when you have the courage to do it, but you still don't do it. I think that's morality. The rest of it is all just circumstance, right? Um, for the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Hmm. Power can be a double-edged sword because it opens you up to more attachments. That could be a positive or negative based on choices. I really, really believe that attachments create a lot of suffering. I do. But I think the attachments that people often think about in terms of creating suffering are attachments to physical things. Like, for instance, I've had this glass since I was a child. I got it in the year 2000. My mom got it for me. It actually says the year 2000. It's actually um, it's from a company that I'm not going to give a shout out to because I absolutely hate the company. Um, but nevertheless, it's always had a sort of special place in me because it's one of those, things that I can remember from my childhood. And, it's something that I had when my mom was still alive. And I can remember, getting it. Um, it's an attachment. But I think the most insidious and harmful attachments are actually attachments to concepts that you have of yourself. Yeah. My boy got offered casting couch by old granny scat, but decided to turn it down and eventually made. Now sell out. Appreciate it, man. Yeah. Yeah. Um, and I think that's it, right? Like, people in extreme power situations are often very bored with their lives. And so they will often try to corrupt people as well, right? They'll try to see how far they can push it. I'm sure that if I was in a, big production house or whatever, and I had a good friend, maybe someone above me or, who was my boss or whatever, would be like, okay, well, I'm going to give you this job, but just an FYI, you got to do this horrible thing to this person. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't had a job in a while, but I imagine that like my experience working at a hedge fund was very, very much like that. Like it was very like me against everybody, and people were kind of like pitting your natural tendency to survive against everyone around you, and it was just making you like a worse person. So yeah, um, but I find those people to be very boring and bored. Would you take a media pass for the Raptors, understanding the limitations it would put on you? um, I think I would have to think about it a lot. Um, I wouldn't take anything that would censor me though. Like so, that has always been the question. But here's the thing: when I was a child, like I was very opinionated, but I was also very obnoxious. I think as I've gotten older, I've become a little bit more polite. It's not tame. It's not afraid. I'm not afraid, but more polite, right? There is a way to address things where you can get to what you want to get to. Like, my point is there's 700 different ways to storm a castle, and not all of them run through the front door. Damn, that was like some deep shit right there, right? Maybe it wasn't that deep, but that's kind of the point. There's a way to call out everything that Fred VanVleet did, probably in, I don't know, a less offensive, less polarizing way. And I'm not really sure that being polarizing or quote unquote polarizing or offensive to anybody or flagrant or um, vulgar. Sometimes my language can skew a little bit into the F bomb territory when I get passionate or heated. There's probably a different way to say stuff like that. What I find to be the case, however, is a lot of people have made mention of the fact that working away from Sportsnet is going to make a certain content creator or certain content creators um, more free to do what they want to do. I don't find that to be the case. There are plenty of people who have been extremely opinionated despite working at, The Athletic or some bigger outlet or whatever, working for the Wall Street Journal. Like they're still kind of gutsy, right? It just so happens that very often you find people with a little bit of integrity do not necessarily they don't they don't ever get hired at those places. So if they were to hire me, like if Sportsnet or something were to hire me, they would have to hire me knowing who I am and what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it my way, right? and that's not to say that I'm arrogant enough to not take direction or not take content creation. I can take notes. I've gotten better at that. But this idea of censoring me, no, I wouldn't do that. But um that being said, the media pass game is very much like that, right? There are certain things you're not supposed to ask or whatever. It just so happens that right now the Raptors are in a place where I don't really have any bad questions to ask. I like the Raptors right now a lot. I like what they're doing a lot until further notice. So if I had been in the press room the last, I don't know, like 40 games, 35 games, I probably would have asked nicer questions than the people who were actually there. But if I was in the press room like 2 years ago, bro, I would be ripping those people a new one and I'd probably get myself kicked out. So I don't know. I guess, yeah, I don't know. It kind of comes back to something like that Brian said, which a lot of people echoed to me later on, which is we like you so much better this year. You're a lot more calm. So I think even though I was very critical of Dennis Schroeder to begin the year, and I was critical of some of the things that Darko Rajakovic did, and I was critical of, maybe the return that the Raptors got on Pascal Siakam, even though I was overjoyed that he got traded, and I continue to be, somewhat critical and continue to harp on the fact that we shouldn't have traded for Jakob Poeltl. Even though I wasn't all positives and kumbayas, I do think that I managed to do it in a somewhat healthier way last year while being honest. And I will continue to evolve and grow in that direction as I hope, right? So this is all much bigger than people know. And I survived a kidnapping when I was 8 years old after fighting a 30, 40-year-old trying to take me. Holy shit. That's crazy, bro. Wow. That's nuts. Do you think that JJ Reddick and Austin Reeves will be able to connect as a coach and player since you can run Reeves in a lot of the sets you would run JJ in when he played? I don't necessarily see the comparison between the two guys. Is it possible you're comparing them because they're two white guys? And I don't see, like, to me, JJ was a movement shooter, whereas Austin Reeves is a more dynamic secondary playmaker. Like, he can shoot a little bit, but, like, he's not like, I would liken JJ more to, like, a Seth Curry, you know what I mean? Not a Steph Curry, a Seth Curry or someone like that, or who else, like JJ Reddick, clones in the NBA right now. I'm not sure who I would liken JJ's game to. There aren't a lot of JJ Reddicks around the league right now, but I'm not sure Austin Reeves would be it. Like, JJ's a really smart coach. There's nothing there's like, he's not he's not a basketball savant. When I listen to Jordy Fernandez or Darko Rajakovic talk about the game, I feel like I'm getting more of a basketball savant, mindset. Tyler Harrow, I think Tyler is way more dynamic and bigger and more talented than JJ Redick was, honestly. Uh, yeah, JJ didn't have that sort of in between game to handle the passing and stuff. That being said, maybe it was more of a limitation of role than anything else. Maybe it was a limitation of era where he came up. Maybe had he been, coming up 15 years later, he probably would have been more of a point guard given his size. And at that point, he probably would have had to hone in on more of his playmaking skills earlier on in his career. But yeah, I don't remember. Granted, I didn't watch JJ Redick's career as intently as I probably could have. But that being said, like, I'm not an expert in JJ Redick's basketball career. Like, I was pretty much out of college basketball right when he was at Duke, and I don't think because he played so many years in LA, and it was like late games or whatever, maybe wasn't watching the Clippers too much. So yeah, Matt Thomas, Boyan Bogdanovic. That's a little closer, but Bogdanovic also has like a little bit more creativity. Yeah, I think JJ Redick is a more limited Boyan Bogdanovic. That might be, but I think he's maybe more of a shorter Kevin Herter actually, without the rebounding. Yeah, I think Kevin Herter is more the archetype, right? Like, that player type is so maybe a Duncan Robinson. Yeah, Matt Thomas is another example. That's two great comments from you today. All right, guys, I'm out. It's 2:40 in the morning. Thanks for bearing with me as I rambled on for the last hour about non-basketball stuff. That should probably be the end of this non-basketball stuff for me. Probably had a lot of stuff about Drake and, that entire situation I want to get off my chest. But I don't think that this person's from my city should be a reason to defend somebody against some of the morally apprehensible, stupid shit that we've heard him do. Um, yeah. And I think if you really want to rep your city, why don't you rep a different artist? There's 500 to 1,000 artists that you can draw from. Google a list, right? And literally go support all of them. Go support, local artists, go support local rappers. You wanna support a really great Canadian rapper, support CJ Flemings. He's awesome. His music's really good. Go support The Weeknd, go support, there's tons. There's so many. It's not the only one. All right. All right. Peace, guys. Have a great night. And yeah, I'll talk to you later.